Hello dears, I hope you're having a fantastic day. Here's yet another episode of the top 10 favorite and from what I believe are the best performances by some of the greatest actors in cinema history. Yes, I'm starting from 10 and then climbing up to that number 1 spot. And let's be serious guys, I have seen and sought out every film of these artists, so these lists come from true and passionate accuracy. I hope you're sitting down for this one, guys, because this one, I'm afraid, is going to get quite personal. I will be honoring one of the greatest influential artists of the American theater and cinema. Montgomery Clift. Born in Omaha, Nebraska in 1920, he experienced so much life and experience by the time he was 14, practically. His family tree was quite wealthy, and they would travel internationally all over the world. This is important to know of Monty Clift just because through all that experience, growing up, knowing the actor he was, you can see the European realism was really hitting hard and effectively for him. His family indeed downsized, and over time, they made their way up to lovely New York, and lo and behold, the artistry of Montgomery Clift is born at the age of 14 and on Broadway. He has wowed and impacted audiences in so many Broadway shows, such as the Pulitzer Prize-winning There Shall Be No Night, Hay Fever, originating the role of Henry in Thornton Wilder's The Skin of Our Teeth, Fly Away Home, Mr. Obedient Husband, among many, many more. Because of his impact, he was invited to study with the great Lee Strasberg of the Actors Studio, really understanding the factors and characteristics of this particular character by actually living it. Quoted, of course, as the method. Montgomery Clift has always been a man of the stage, but of course, the pictures are the way to make more of a better living. He made his way there, but not without terms. I just love that Monty didn't compromise on his morals, and he refused to sign any contract for a long while with any major studio. He didn't want the burden of being forced to do movies he believed weren't worth it. Would you believe he turned down the lead roles in Sunset Boulevard, On the Waterfront, and East of Eden? Of course, every one of those roles earned their respective actors Oscar nominations. You might say he's a dope for doing that, but nah, I believe Montgomery Clift was very aware of his instrument, and plus he wanted to have more control of his performance. But of course, Marlon Brando and James Dean were his contemporaries. How could he do that? Well, just put it in your minds that if they played these roles, that means Monty was offered the roles first before these two. That says a whole lot for the quality and capabilities of Montgomery Clift. Sure, it may not be totally true, but damn it, I like to think so. It is very difficult to narrow down just to 10, folks, because I could certainly do a top 20, even though he only did 17. Folks, like I said, this is going to really hit hard for me because Montgomery Clift is truly one of my biggest heroes in film and inspirations in my profession as an actor. I have many, of course, but Clift's style, his charm, charisma, and vulnerability just opened my eyes and is the leading example of the sensitive young man who never loses strength because of it. As a matter of fact, he really gains it. Shall we get started, ladies and gentlemen? Okay, how about it? Here are the top 10 best performances of one of the greatest actors, Montgomery Clift. Starting off at number 10, we have The Young Lions. This was the first movie Monty did after Raintree County, aka after his horrible car accident. And damn, man, Montgomery Clift was fantastic in this. Monty honestly felt his performance here as Noah Ackerman was among his very, very best work. And I agree for sure. Based on the novel, it chronicles 3 stories of soldiers during World War II. 2 Americans, played by Dean Martin and Clift, and a German, played by Marlon Brando. Clift is a Jewish American who is gung-ho, but experiences so much anti-Semitism in the midst of it. Clift was, once again, so proud of his work. He thought for sure he would get the Oscar for this one. but no, he wasn't even nominated. Everyone was still in the accident that he had, but thought he was too old to play this role, an A1 soldier. Personally, it really doesn't matter. He still stands out as a burst of human dignity and realism. He even helped Dean Martin with his performance here. And Dean Martin really accredits Montgomery Clift by really propelling him more as a dramatic actor. Number 9, The Heiress. Came out in 1949, again based on the novel by Henry James and the play. This tells the story of dear Catherine Sloper, daughter of a wealthy surgeon who is always the one left behind and in the dark when it comes to true love. Until she meets Morris Townsend, played sensitively and really against type by Clift. They fall in love and she wants her father's blessing, but he refuses to give it because not only does he believe Morris is a fortune hunter, but he doesn't believe his own daughter can find true love. It's truly a heartbreaking story, and when I first saw this, folks, I thought it was okay. I mean, I was in high school, for God's sake. Now seeing it as an adult, oh my God, my heart sank. The film won 4 Oscars, including Best Actress for Olivia de Havilland, who was just wonderful as Catherine. Clift reportedly walked out of the premiere because he hated his performance in this film. He hated it. He made a lot of compromises. Everybody made a lot of compromises and rewrites for sure on this film. And plus, Clift and de Havilland didn't necessarily get along. But I still think Clift is so damn effective in the role because he's such a mystery, and we don't ever really know if he's a shit or not until the end of Act 2. All in all, it really is a fantastic performance and film. I highly recommend this one for you if you haven't seen it. Number 8, The Misfits. Boy, is this a fun film. Well, okay, maybe not fun, but indeed infamous. Directed by America's sweetheart, John Huston. That's sarcasm. It stars Marilyn Monroe and Clark Gable in their last screen roles as a young hot divorcee, Rosalind, and an old school cowboy, Gay, who start a relationship and get the idea from Guido, Gay's mechanic, the amazing Eli Wallach, to start Mustanging, which is capturing young Mustang horses and selling them. In the midst of it all, they bump into Perce, played by Montgomery Clift, whom they convince to join them on the expedition. Although he has the worst luck with injuries, the triangle becomes complicated when Rosalind starts caring for one over the other, and it just takes their relationship upside down. This film is very much an underrated one. It bombed at the box office. Would you believe that? Which you should always ask, why? You have 3 amazing stars in this, but sometimes people are not always attached to more simpler stories like these, where it's just character development. This came out in 1961, so people were most definitely experiencing it, but this production was tainted from the very beginning. We could be here all day talking about what went wrong and wild behind the scenes here, but all that I will say today, the performances are just excellent. It's regarded by many today as a masterpiece. Everyone is honestly at their very best here, especially Clift. Of course, just look at the phone booth scene with Clift and his mother, which apparently he did that only in 1 or 2 takes perfectly. He and Marilyn, of course, were very, very close. Intimately close, as a matter of fact, having both come from the actor's studio. Number 7, Wild River. Quite a lovely film directed by Elia Kazan. The only time Clift was actually directed by one of his original acting teachers. He stars as a TVA administrator who comes to evict a stubborn family on the Tennessee River because of a damn construction on site, which would obviously behoove them to pack up and leave, but no, they want to stay. It's their home. However, in the process, he ends up falling for the widowed granddaughter, played brilliantly by Lee Remick. Clift personally thought, again, this performance here was genuinely great, which is very important because he always was critical of his own performances. And he was quite correct. His depth as Chuck Glover goes deeper, given to the fact you have frickin' Elia Kazan directing you. He and Remek's chemistry is just as vibrant as Clift's other romantic features. It is often forgotten, but politically and environmentally, it's really an important work. And it is very dear and an important work for Clift. Number 6, Freud. Ah, yes, the infamous Freud, or what is often titled the secret passion. I choose Freud personally. Teaming up again with Johnhuston, Clift steps in the shoes of Sigmund Freud, the great Austrian psychologist who progresses the method of hypnosis on his patients suffering from hysteria. This somewhat biopic is still a really good film. Seriously, I actually quite enjoy this film, despite its problems. It's just as eerie and mythic as you would suspect when you're doing a study on Freud's mind and the treatment of hysteria involving hypnosis. But of course, this is remembered as the film where Clift and Johnhuston had a huge falling out. Johnhuston had a reputation of being one of the old school silent tyrants on set. I say silent just because he may have chewed you out one-on-one. He was never like barking out loud. Behaving like a sadist, as Marilyn Monroe would say. It was an emotional roller coaster as I see it, having heard both pros and cons of working with the man. And there were issues with the Misfits set for sure, with Clift still drinking heavily and the drugs to help him with his body after the crash. It really was amplified for this film, even though, according to Clift, there were so many rewrites. There would be a new script every day that Clift would have to work with, which drove him obviously nuts. The production on the film kept getting delayed, and the studio blamed Clift for it, and with his whole alcohol abuse. However, when the film premiered, it did really well, making the studio good money, so they reached a settlement. Jeez. And honestly, I think Clift is absolutely brilliant here. The complement of the beautiful black and white photography and German expressionistic look just gives Clift the illuminating sensation as if we're being hypnotized by him as well. It was rumored Clift might be nominated for an Oscar for his performance here around the Oscar campaign. And I really wish he was. But his performance as Freud is definitely another little hidden gem. Number 5, Red River. One of the best westerns ever made, in my book. Directed by the legendary Howard Hawks. The scope of this film is just thrilling and inspirational. It stars that other legend. What's that guy's name? Oh yeah, John Wayne. Thomas Tunson, who, after losing his true love to an attack, starts a successful cattle driving ranch. But in order to keep working, he leads a cattle drive to Missouri, with the help of Groot, played by Walter Brennan, and his new self-adopted son, Matt, played excellently by Clift. During the whole expedition, Clift and Wayne battle each other on how they choose to handle things, almost ending with such fatal consequences. This is totally a metaphor of acting styles between Wayne and Clift, for sure, which John Wayne really couldn't stand the acting style of Clift. But I love it. It creates such tension between them that we, the audience, can enjoy the mental and emotional explosion on screen. As a matter of fact, I think John Wayne is at his best here. And when you have Clift feeding you such realism, how can you not react with truth? If you remember your history, Clift's performance is often sought as one of the first obvious examples of homosexuality on film, which is pretty evident. When they have Cherry Valance joining the herd, played by John Ireland, he comes up to Matt and asks, "That was a good-looking gun you were going to use. Can I see it?" Clift scratches his nose, giving him this little amused look. And then Cherry asks, "I'll show you mine." Nice. Real nice. Man, I haven't seen such beautiful subtlety like that since Brokeback Mountain. This film is such a classic, and I think this was a fantastic second feature of Clift that really showed how he can outshine the screen legend of legends. The Duke. Amazing. There's just nothing better with the ever so classic line, "Take him to Missouri, Matt." Yahoo! Number 4, The Search. Technically Montgomery Clift's feature debut, even though he shot Red River first. But this is also his first Oscar nomination for Best Actor here, which is such a hidden gem if I've ever seen one. Came out just 6 months before Red River, and Montgomery Clift, in my opinion, makes this film what it is. A heartfelt, coming-of-age drama for both a soldier and a young boy. Okay, Fred Zinnemann should be given some good props too, since he directed this piece, earning him an Oscar nod for directing as well. A young Czech Jewish boy named Karol survives his run out of Auschwitz, searching desperately for his mother, but then comes across Steve, an army engineer who takes care of him, while his mother is also desperately searching for him. Steve actually takes the time and teaches him English and manners, and of course, through time they build such a close bond with each other that if Karol's mother finds him, would Steve want him to go? This, ladies and gentlemen, is the theme that Spielberg would popularize his whole career. The human sentiment between a guardian and a young child. The chemistry between Clift and a young 10-year-old Ivan Jandl is simply beautiful. Jandl actually earned a special juvenile Oscar for his performance in this film, one of the few child actors to actually do so. But again, when you have Clift alongside you, you can only do better work. Clift also was extremely instrumental with the screenplay. He was still so hot and fresh from stage, and major studios were dying to have him in pictures. But Clift was holding out for the best film to be his debut. He had to make sure the writing was going to be so genuine that it cut deep. And being a man of simplicity, Clift realized the power of just saying so much by not saying anything at all, which is why quite a bit was cut from the screenplay. Clift said the screenplay was more like The Yearling with added sugar. Clift never received a writing credit, even though when the original writers were Oscar nominated for the screenplay and actually won the Oscar for Best Story, back when the screenplay and story for film were separated in 2 different categories. Despite that, Clift's Academy Award nominated performance has been said as being one of the biggest influential performances in film, especially for Clint Eastwood, who has said Clift's performance here inspired him to become an actor. You and I both, Clint. You and I both. Number 3, From Here to Eternity. This is the second time I've mentioned this film on this channel, the first being for Deborah Kerr, and you better believe I'm gonna keep mentioning it over and over and over again, folks, when it's necessary. I have fallen in love with this film when I first saw it as a kid, and I still love it to this day. When I first saw Montgomery Clift walk on in the very beginning, man, I was already hypnotized. It's as if Freud was a confirmation that he has been hypnotizing people since the beginning of his career. This was the very first film I ever saw of Clift's, but I was already aware he was among the greatness of his contemporaries, like Brando and James Dean. And seeing his progression as Pruitt was all extraordinary. If you don't know the story, how could you not? But it all centers on a U.S. Army base in Hawaii with many episodes of the soldiers and the people they associate with, specifically the tale of Pruitt, who was a prize boxer who refused to fight for the army. And because of his refusal, he gets beaten down and punished by his commanding officers. A bit of positivity, though. He befriends Maggio, played with such wit and depth by Sinatra, and Alma, or should I say Lorraine, played amazingly by Donna Reed. Clift absolutely threw himself in this role, learning to play the bugle, for real, even though he knew he would be dubbed, learning to box, and learning the manual labor himself of what a soldier goes through on the barracks, and getting the mannerisms down for James Jones, the novelist from which his book inspired the movie. It was extremely meaningful for him, and many of the actors, including Sinatra and Burt Lancaster, said that Clift made them better on screen. The many, many scenes and reaction shots from Clift are just spellbinding, thrilling, evocative, and truly heartbreaking. All the latter scenes between he and Donna Reed just make my heart drop. Clift thought for sure he would win the Oscar for this one, but lo and behold, it went to William Holden for Stalag 17. And yes, personally, that Oscar should have gone to Clift for this. He was just the most real, the most genuine, the biggest inspiration from this. Such a beautiful piece of work here. Number 2, Judgment at Nuremberg. My God. I get chills thinking about this movie. Who would have thought a huge courtroom drama like this would get such attention? Everyone. Helmed by one of the greatest and influential artists in cinema, Stanley Kramer, it tells the fictionalized true story of the Nuremberg trials. Here they are trying 4 judges and prosecutors, as opposed to 16 in history, for the horrible crimes of the Holocaust. You have the best of the best all around. It should be regarded as one of the greatest films ever made, period. The all-star cast agreed to do this movie for much lower than their normal salary, especially Mr. Clift. He agreed for only his expenses to be covered, because he knew this was such an important work. He turned it down at first, but he agreed to do it if he had final confirmation of his scene's dialogue. There was a scene written where he comes in to speak to the prosecutor, played by Richard Widmark, which was the role Clift was initially offered, funny enough. He found the role to be boring, and knew the role of Rudolf Peterson was quite special. There was something there. His character is a concentration camp survivor who is also mentally challenged. But anyway, Clift wanted that first scene of his to be cut so that he could be introduced to the audience at his testimony, which is his only scene in the film. One scene, and Montgomery Clift gives one of the most heartbreaking and chilling performances in cinema. We are seeing so much out of Clift on this scene. He's so terrified of being there. Though being polite, when Maximilian Schill, the defense attorney, comes up to cross-examine, Peterson is shaking. His hands are sweating. He's so confused. He's puzzled. And when it's revealed about his mother, he explodes. Clift's voice is so bruising to the heart that you can't help it. You break down for him. People say his performance was very, very similar to Clift's own personal challenges at this time. Being broken, a mess, practically a pariah in Hollywood, and feeling utterly helpless. And I can see that for sure, but I personally disagree. Sure, the trouble with the lines can affect someone's confidence, but if I didn't tell you he was skipping lines in his own speech, would you really notice here? I don't think so. Everything surrounding this film is masterful, earning 11 Academy Award nominations, including one for Best Supporting Actor for Clift. It's hard, but yet again, I would have given the Oscar to him for this one as well. Even though George Chakiris was fantastic in West Side Story, with all of this film's glory, you ask any film historian, what is the first thing they remember of this film? It's always got to be Montgomery Clift's one scene that packs a frickin' punch to your soul. Please watch this scene. I mean, watch the whole film, please. But his scene is 12 minutes of some of the best film work and best acting in cinema history you will see. Now, here are some honorable mentions. Suddenly Last Summer, the film adaptation of Tennessee Williams' haunting play with Clift as the financially flattened doctor who is demanded by Violet, played by Katharine Hepburn, to lobotomize Catherine, played by Elizabeth Taylor. But he must find out the truth. Yeah, the movie has pacing issues, narrative issues, and everybody really didn't have a good time making this one. Shocking. Clift especially because he was still on painkillers and consuming more alcohol and doing the best he could for this film. And Mankiewicz, the director, and Sam Spiegel, the producer, wanted to fire him so many times, but Elizabeth Taylor, God bless her, protected him, of course, from the very beginning. I will say, he does have a lot of great moments in this film. Raintree County, at the time, the most expensive big-budget Southern Belle epic estimated at about $5 million, starring Elizabeth Taylor and Montgomery Clift once again, as it trails the love and marriage of a Midwestern writer, Clift, with a spoiled Scarlett O'Hara-like beauty, Taylor, during the backdrop of the Civil War. And they find out so many things different between each other. This film tried so hard to be Gone with the Wind, but really didn't follow through. However, there are some great performances in this, in spite of Montgomery Clift's horrible car accident. Yes, this is the film he was doing when this happened. He left a party on set, drunk presumably, and fell asleep at the wheel and smashed into a telephone pole. Liz Taylor, Kevin McCarthy, and Rock Hudson were there to help him. And honestly, he was facing death. Liz Taylor literally crawled into the back door of his car and removed Monty's 2 front teeth from his throat because he was choking on them. It was amazing how they protected him from the reporters and all the tabloids. After 9 weeks of recovery and plastic surgery, which, side note, God bless and huge applause to the doctors and the surgeons for this one. My goodness, they did amazing work to help recover Montgomery Clift. He came back to set and filming resumed. Of course, the producers thought of a contingency to get another actor, but Liz Taylor, again, pulled her weight and said she would not do this film without Monty. Indiscretion of an American Wife, or rather, Terminal Station, the latter being quite more of a lovelier film. Directed by Vittorio De Sica, with Clift and Jennifer Jones in an adulterous, romantic, lovely Italian affair. But Jones wants to break it off and return back to her husband. But is she certain that is what she wants to do? Dun, 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 dun. I think Jones and Clift do the best they can with this, and there are some good melodramatic scenes here, with a good amount of realism, which is what De Sica and Clift wanted, but producer and husband of Jones, David O. Selznick, wanted more of a sexy, slick affair, I guess. And then Selznick cut the American release to only 63 minutes. I mean, what the hell, man? Like I know your big hit was Gone with the Wind, but jeez. But then it was re-released years later in its full version entitled Terminal Station, which is why I say that is better. I've seen both cuts, so I can confirm on Terminal Station for sure. I Confess, a great underrated classic directed by the master of suspense himself, Alfred Hitchcock, having Clift as Father Michael Logan, working late in his church in Quebec. And then he has Sorry, I was actually about to say customer. Come right on in, we're having a sale on confessionals. Sorry, okay. A shook-up man shows up in the church, into the confessional booth, and he confesses to Father Michael he murdered someone. Now, the police are suspecting Father Michael since he won't reveal anything due to his duty as a priest. To me, that's absolutely brilliant. Being a person of faith myself, I can totally understand that. But man, I don't think any priest today would be all about that. And Father Michael has a love interest in this? But he's a Catholic priest. Really? Anyway, Clift had issues working with Hitchcock, and more so vice versa. But I believe Clift was just so nervous because he's working with freaking Hitchcock, right? All in all, the whole confessional scene is breathtaking. Once again, you see so much on Clift's face. It's spine-tingling. Lonely Hearts, which is quite an underrated piece, I must say. Based on the novel and Broadway play, it has Mr. Clift as Adam White, an ambitious writer wanting a big opportunity to write under the Chronicle, and with a lot of snake-like behavior. Robert Ryan. Side note, I freaking love Robert Ryan. Wait until I do a video on him. He agrees to give Montgomery Clift the opportunity to start from the bottom and answer an advice column for lonely housewives called Miss Lonely Hearts. The harder he works, the more his relationship with his loved one, Justy, played by Dolores Hart, is sacrificed. This film is very much directed like a play, which is why I really like and respect this film. The beginning scene between Myrna Loy, and Robert Ryan is just captivating. Or how about that scene where Adam visits his father in prison, and when his father is trying to provoke him for his self-righteous act of murdering his mother. Again, the look on Clift's face tells us everything with just simplicity. It's a very powerful scene. Of course, everyone usually remembers this film for Maureen Stapleton's film debut and Oscar-nominated work here, which I think she wholeheartedly deserved. But the star power of Clift and his genuine spirit is what makes this one truly a small gem. Number 1, A Place in the Sun. Is anyone surprised? Perhaps, but ladies and gentlemen, I love this film so much. I didn't at first, because I saw this when I was just a kid in high school. So I only really thought, after seeing From Here to Eternity, Clift here is now just taking on the hot, gorgeous, romantic, young, sensitive lead type. You know what I mean? Nothing more. Until I watched it again. And then again. And again. And obviously again recently. And for it to be number 1, you can obviously understand its power to me. And I'm not the only one. There are countless critics and artists who gave loads of amazing reviews, glowing reviews, and agree wholeheartedly. Montgomery Clift's second Academy Award nominated performance as George Eastman is a performance that absolutely stands the test of time as the representation of the sensitive young man wanting more in life. It honestly rivals James Dean's Cal in East of Eden. George is a lonely drifter who comes into town after his dad dies to meet his estranged uncle, who is a wealthy factory owner. He gives him a job and then avoids Montgomery Clift like the plague, like he's bottom of the barrel. So then he meets Alice, played brilliantly by Shelley Winters, and they have a lovely relationship. All is well until his uncle remembers him, and the fact that George is a hard worker. He's working his way up the ladder, doing his absolute best. So then he invites him to social parties, social gatherings, along the societal, overly glamorous types, which he's very uncomfortable around. He then meets glamorous Angela, played by Liz Taylor. They fall in love instantly, of course, and she opens her whole world up to George, whose world is turned inside out for both the greater and then again for the worse. Now he's stuck between two worlds. And what is he to do? Like I said, it wasn't until years later I really understood the power, the conflict, and turmoil that George goes through. I mean, it could be very black and white. I mean, what's the matter with you? You're already with Alice. And she's pregnant, for God's sake. But now you want to go with Angela because she's just this young, hot thing? No. There is so much more within their relationship that I'm not talking about here. In truth, yes, George makes very, very, very bad mistakes. Fatal mistakes, actually. But he is absolutely a tragic hero, which this is why the original film this was a remake of is called An American Tragedy, which is not a good film at all. But remember, it's 1951 here. Young men were becoming loners, especially in George's case, where his parents were almost non-existent, and he had to start from scratch. And genuinely, he is a sweet human being who just wants what we all want in life: freedom, and yet a life filled with true love and joy. And it's heartbreaking with what the film concludes with George, which I won't spoil. You have to see it. You have to. And if you're like me and don't care for it, see it again, please. When we talk about romantic dramas, this is one that is so deeply moving and stirring that I, among millions, consider this an influence on more romantic dramas that followed. And what makes it come to that pedestal is, of course, Montgomery Clift. God. We feel everything watching him here. From that close-up introduction of our hero in the very beginning, we are absolutely in his shoes the whole way. Clift used everything on building George. As Monty would say, when I sweat, my body doesn't know how to act, so I just react. So anything the human body naturally does, of course, he doesn't fight it. He incorporates it in that scene on the rowboat with Shelley Winters, and oh God, the blood boils. My heart stops. His face in that scene intensifies me every time. Of course, this inspired Liz Taylor as well, as this was the film they met on. Liz Taylor has often said it was this film, and working with Monty, that made her into a real actress. Monty gave her such great advice on building a character that she felt like she was being honored among the big leagues. Isn't that the most brilliant thing? Of all the actors and artists of the Actors Studio, the big Stella Adler, Lee Strasberg wave, who else would give their fellow actors advice when they actually asked for it? I only see Montgomery Clift as that actor who was so giving and helpful to his fellow actors. Almost all of these films, every film he's done, he was there to help his fellow actors. Sure, he's had issues with a lot of his co-stars. I've talked about them. But he was still such a genuine and soft soul. It may still be mind-blowing to a lot of people on how he was not only gay, he was actually bisexual. He went with men and women. People have said he was such a repressed homosexual. But after reading about him and watching the amazing documentary Making Montgomery Clift, made by his nephew, Robert Clift, he was utterly full of joy. He didn't feel repression or guilt or negativity about his sexuality at all. He fully embraced it. There have been so many myths about Montgomery Clift that have been almost cemented in concrete for years. That couldn't be further from the truth. My goodness, I couldn't even bear to talk about the A&E biography about Montgomery Clift, which is why I highly recommend seeing Making Montgomery Clift. It is such a beautiful film that will truly open your eyes. To me, what really matters is the work, the influence, the professionalism, and the sincerity. Are you a good human being? Montgomery Clift was not perfect. We all know that. But he inspired millions of young actors to live in the moment, be true to yourself, not to label yourself, and always give everything you have in your body to a role. Advice I follow to the best I can, every time. Montgomery Clift died, unfortunately, at the humble age of 45 in his own home of coronary occlusion. There are so many actors that miss him to this day, and I only marvel at what he would have given us more in film and stage. Thank you so much, Mr. Clift, for inspiring me, millions of other artists, and giving the world a piece of your soul. Well, that about does it, dear ones. Tell me, what is your favorite performance from this amazing man? Please comment below. I love to hear everything you have to say. If you like this, please click like, subscribe, tell all your friends who are big fans of classic films or who want to learn more. And yes, my friends, I have a Patreon page now, so you can sign up for more detailed content among many other bonus features, movie trivia, knowledge, interaction, and many, many more. Of course, ladies and gents, thank you all so much for watching. God bless every one of you, and yes, keep the classics alive.